couple of months ago, I was hanging out with some friends, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I made a joke. I said something that kind of made light of 9/11. Now, it wasn't meant to be disrespectful at all, and I don't think it was. I mean, it was the same sort of lightness that me and my friends had often used when talking about 9/11 before. But on this particular occasion, one of my friends just looked at me and said, "Stop." She wasn't angry, but apparently she had been there, and I didn't know that. And so she went on to tell her story of how she had been a college freshman. She was her first time away from home, and she was in class when the attack happened. They felt the ground shake, and they thought it was an earthquake, and then she went out in the street, and everyone was panicking. There was no communication, and didn't know what was going to happen next, and it was the most terrifying day of her life. On September 11th, 2001, I was 11 years old. I was living in a suburb of Detroit, and I had just started the 6th grade. I had just started middle school. I was old enough to know what had happened, and in detail, actually. I was just as nerdy back then as I am now, and so I was that kid who would correct other kids the next day at school when they got details wrong. And I was old enough to, like so many others, remember where I was when I found out. And I mean, really, I remember a lot of strange details about that day. I remember I was sitting in my 6th grade English class when the principal came on the school's speaker system and made an announcement that the World Trade Center had been hit by 2 airplanes. I remember that when I got home from school that day, my dad was in the backyard mowing the lawn, and I walked right past him into the garage and grabbed my pogo stick and started pogo sticking, and then he turns off the mower and goes, "Did you hear what happened today?" And still pogo sticking, I go, "Yeah." And I remember that evening I had a voice lesson in preparation for an opera I was in at the time, and my teacher had been in Canada when it happened, because Canada and Detroit are actually very close. They're just connected by a bridge. And so she said it took her 3 hours to get back into the US. So I was old enough to know what had happened, and I was old enough to remember some random details about the day. But I wasn't old enough to really understand what was happening with any emotional depth. I was at a point in my life where I was just starting to understand how the world actually worked. And so, I mean, to my 11-year-old mind, with little else to compare it to, 9/11 was just another confusing part of an already confusing world. And in these 10 intervening years, we've heard a lot about how 9/11 was a shock to our system, about how the world changed dramatically as a result. And I mean, I know that to be factually true, but that hasn't been a part of my experience, because I don't know what the world was like before September 11th. I didn't differentiate between this disaster and any other major disaster. I mean, I didn't differentiate between New York City and any other faraway place that I had never been to. And so I was pretty nonchalant about the whole thing. I mean, it's not that I didn't think it was terrible. It's just that I didn't think about it much at all. And that general mindset that I developed as an 11-year-old went pretty much unchallenged until I was hanging out with my friends a couple of months ago. And I mean, it's not like I've had any sudden massive revelation about the whole thing, but I've been making a conscious effort to try and find some degree of deeper emotional understanding about that day, trying to understand on a deeper level how that day has shaped the world that I've grown up in. I've been watching archived clips of the live news coverage from that day, particularly when the second plane hit and the anchors went from talking about, "Oh, this is such a horrible accident," to there being legitimate fear in their voices. But what struck me the most so far has been a documentary I watched about The Falling Man, which is one of the most iconic yet horrifying pictures from the day. And I mean, the picture doesn't need a documentary. The picture speaks for itself. This is just a normal guy with friends and family who showed up to work on that day like any other day and was caught in an attack and suddenly faced with an impossible choice. And so the final decision of his life was to exercise the one fleeting bit of control he had over an otherwise uncontrollable situation, and he jumped. That's not easy to think about. I mean, nothing about September 11th is easy to think about, and if your experience has been anything like mine, there's a good chance you haven't. But with the 10th anniversary upon us, I would challenge you to think about it. And I would challenge you to think about it deeply. And equally important, I would challenge you to share your experience, because all of our experiences were different. We were all affected by September 11th differently. And every new perspective adds to our collective understanding. Anyway, thank you for listening to my perspective. That's all I have for now, so stay safe, be vigilant. If you see something, say something. The bad guys are still out there. And goodbye.
If you like what you just saw, if Dan put you in a state of awe, subscribe to him and click the orange button. It really, 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 really means something. If you do that, that'd be really cool.